Hello everyone, and welcome back to Musings from an Expat. This post was inspired by a conversation I actually had recently with my family, where I feel like I gave a pretty poor answer. But now I've had time to kind of consider my response. Hopefully this is going to be a bit of a more adequate and well-reasoned explanation. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about why philosophy is really important, and especially in politics. So now I accept that this is a little bit esoteric. I was in a meeting recently where we were discussing the relative merits of publishing in different types of academic journals. This meeting was held in Czech, and so obviously I only understood part of it. But thanks to my friends, I kind of understood most of the most salient kind of points to help me translate and stuff. But basically, if you publish in a journal dedicated to philosophy, your so-called impact factor, which affects how much money you get and all this sort of things, is approximately 0. So if you publish in a journal dedicated to political science, for example, your impact factor is generally somewhere between 0.2 and 0.6, so still fairly low. If you publish in a journal dedicated to the so-called natural sciences, though, your impact factor can be up to about 35. This just shows you that the type of research which is being promoted in the Czech Republic at the moment. Actually, I think this kind of misses the point of research, though. The ideas which underpin this way of apportioning money is deep down a sort of philosophical decision. Philosophy underpins so much of our everyday lives, but we just don't acknowledge it because it seems natural to us as breathing. What do I mean by this, though? I mean that philosophy is simply a way of seeing and understanding the world. So we have this concept in academia known as epistemology, or the study of knowledge. How can we know things? This is really, really important because out of the study of epistemology was developed things like the so-called scientific method upon which all natural science is based, the idea of observation and replicable results and all these sorts of other things. Without philosophy, we wouldn't have had any of that development. But over time, we've come to accept that certain ideas or ways of doing things are simply the way things are. But I think if we were to advance in society, we need sometimes to question these implicitly held beliefs. If astronomers, for example, had simply accepted that the sun revolved around the Earth, we wouldn't have many of the technologies that we rely on today. While I study political philosophy, why am I talking about physics? Well, it's the same principle in the sense that we need to constantly question and re-examine how we see the world. How we measure and understand it depends on whether we're able to advance as a society or not. So I want to take you on a quick journey through history just to illustrate this point. And hopefully this illustration will kind of help you understand what I'm trying to accomplish with my PhD and with my research. Okay, so at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, you have a group of philosophers and economists and people like that who sought to explain how the seeming chaos of markets could be rationalised and explained. One of the most important of these sort of philosopher economists was Adam Smith. He wrote several books, the most famous of which is probably The Wealth of Nations, originally published in 1776. And for the purposes of this video, this is the book that I'm going to be focusing on. So Smith basically made the point that markets work when a range of producers attempt to make and sell stuff in a common market. Consumers will generally tend towards the cheapest, but still high quality products. If a producer is able in some way to make his product better, or to reduce his unit costs, then he will do better than his rivals. He'll be forced to innovate in order to compete. This system basically worked, or does work, in aggregate, and the most efficient producers were able, or are able, to make lots of money, which in turn they invest in order to make even more money. So on aggregate, this kind of happened, and so basically the system seemed to work. This seems to be the basic worldview of lots of people in the world today, that on average markets seem to work, and this obviously is sort of true. Obviously there are problems to do with branding, whereby products of inferior or the same quality are sold for much higher prices due to the label that they're attached to. Obviously cartelling is another huge issue, whereby a group of producers collude and agree on on selling certain products for a certain price. But basically, the system kind of works. So this can be seen as a the macro argument or the big picture. Then along came a group of different writers, a little bit later on, probably the most famous of which is Karl Marx. He also wrote a lot of books on a variety of different subjects, but I think his probably most famous work again is Das Kapital, originally published in 3 volumes, the first of which was published in 1867. This book basically looked at this macro system, which came to be known as capitalism, and offered some reasons why it can't last forever, and pointed out some major flaws in its basic assumptions. Amongst other things, Marx looked at the issue of what happened to people who didn't own what he termed the means of production, or the ordinary workers. He pointed out that profits made by businesses basically result from owners, or capitalists as he termed them, underpaying for some part of the production process, be that maybe the purchase of raw materials, or, as he saw it, more likely the wages of workers. So Marx pointed out that the easiest way to make a business more efficient is to cut the wages of workers, a state he called exploitation. So this can be done in a number of ways. Obviously you can cut wages directly, or, more likely in the modern age, you simply demand more hours, or more labour from more production per hour. This was a huge problem in Marx's time, especially where child labour was common and there were, no real worker protection, no real health and safety to speak of, anything like that. Obviously, the situation has improved since Marx, but his core arguments about worker exploitation do remain valid, and they are yet to be solved. But how does this relate to philosophy? Well, you could argue that Marx takes a more sort of individualist view of economies, looking almost at micro issues. And this is where we have the intersection of politics. Most of the economically conservative parties in the world take this macro view. They look at Smith, or at least they think they do, and they say, yeah, he was right, on the whole the system works, fair enough, blah, blah, blah. Whereas left-wing parties tend to look at the micro issues, and they say, hang on a minute, what about individual workers? What about the unemployed? What about those who are unable to compete due to the natural tendencies of markets to gravitate towards the larger end, due to the benefits of the economies of scale? Fundamentally, the left and the right have an epistemological disagreement, which isn't really talked about, but it is inherently important. But so what? How is this actually going to take up 100,000 words or so? Okay, so I want to look at whether Smith actually said some of the things that are attributed to him. I want to read not just The Wealth of Nations, but also some more of his back catalogue. Because Smith, like any other philosopher, needs to be taken in context. It's also really important that people challenge the status quo, because if we just look at the macro view, then we risk getting left behind or forgotten. And if we just take the micro view, then again, we have a huge problem. We forget the economy needs to work as a whole and not just on an individual kind of level. The aim of my thesis is therefore to research and to provide some sort of kind of balance between these two competing epistemological views, and hopefully to do my bit to hold our leaders actually to account. So once again, thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe, and please visit my written blog for a bit more detailed explanations of some of these ideas, the link to which can be found in the description below. So thank you all very much for watching, and I'll hopefully post again soon.